Hi, I'm Andy Call, lead pastor at Church of the Savior. Been thinking a lot about grace. Grace was the subject of our worship service this past Sunday, the topic of my message to our congregation. Grace is a word that we use all the time in the English language. We have people whose names are Grace. You might know someone in your life whose first name is Grace. Grace is the word that we use to describe the prayer that we often give before we eat a meal together. And grace is also a word that is used to describe dexterity or physical presence, someone who is graceful in their movements. There's also another phrase that we often use in the English language, "There but by the grace of God go I." Now, in its original usage, that phrase actually was a pretty good thing, and you may want to look that up on your own. I'll leave that to you to decide about that yourself. But the way that we often use that phrase in the English language now, "There but by the grace of God go I," makes it sound as though grace is some kind of a privilege, that God chooses to bestow favor on some and not on others. That's really not the way we understand grace as people of faith. That's not a Christian understanding of grace. You see, grace is God's gift to us, the loving kindness that God shows toward humanity. And that's a free gift that God offers to us no matter who we are. It's not something that we deserve or something that we earn. It's not a special privilege that God bestows on some and not on others. The difference seems to be that some people accept God's grace and let it go to work in their life, and other people turn away from it. But it's always a gift that God gives to us. We've thought about three expressions of grace, of God's grace offered to us. One is an expression of grace that is we call prevenient, the grace that God shows to us before we even know we need God's grace, that tug on our hearts toward right and wrong, the yearning for relationship with God. Then there's grace active in us that brings us toward forgiveness and wholeness, that helps us to turn away from things that are destructive to ourselves and others and moves toward things that bring wholeness and life and health to us, that restores us in relationship to God. And then grace is always at work in us, helping us to grow more perfect toward God's love and in likeness of Christ. All of those ways that God's grace is active in us are all part of God's gift to us. They're always available to us, and God is always working within us. Grace isn't some kind of a special favor that is given to some and not to others. Grace is a gift that God is always longing to bring to us. My prayer is that this week you're learning to grow in grace, in understanding God's work in your life, and then reflecting that grace toward the people around you. Friends, let us grow in God's grace. Let us grow in our understanding of that and in our living of that grace. May God be with you this week.